Well, I didn't hear a ding, but I am thinking that this has started recording. Lori, can you give me confirmation you can hear me okay? You're muted.
Your sound is good.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's awesome to be here with you today and be here with you virtually. This is a relatively new program for me, so bear with me and be patient with me as I go through this. And if I stumble a bit, I know you are holding me in community, and also feel really grateful to have Lori there as my backup. And Lori, I'm going to ask you, how do I get my camera to be full screen for folks? Oh, I closed the presentation, I think. There we go. All right. So I'm here in Golden, Colorado. I live in Denver, not too far away. I have been the Director of Religious Education at Jefferson Unitarian Church for, oh my gosh, I've lost count. I'm going on my 5th or 6th year. And in the course of my work here, and my work is with, currently with children and youth from age birth through high school, I have really been curious about safe congregations. What does it mean to be a safe congregation? Is this a designation? Is this a practice? Is this a policy? How do we keep those in our midst who we love and care for safe? So I'm really thrilled to be here with you, and I am going to share my PowerPoint presentation. And when I do that, I'm going to take my camera off. And there are going to be some times during this where I will also share my screen and take you through some online resources. So let me share my PowerPoint with you. And let's turn my camera off. Bear with me, folks. All right, I'm still here. I'm going to get my PowerPoint presentation up here for you. I should hopefully be able to still hear my voice. And there's the first slide that many of you saw. And we're going to light our chalice. We have a reading from our hymnal. It's reading 434. And it says, "May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations, be inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other." I especially like that chalice lighting being virtual and knowing that we are connected through the distance. So in the spirit of safe congregations, I wanted us to spend just a moment creating our own safe space. And given the fact that we are virtual and this is a listen-only meeting, I have taken the liberty of putting together some ways that I feel we can be safe in this time together. And this is one of the times where I will absolutely invite you, after you hear this and read this, if there's anything else that you need to feel safe during this conversation, please put it in the chat box. So first and foremost, I'm asking that we affirm and strive to uphold the 7 Unitarian Universalist principles in our time together. And know that by the very nature of exploring this issue of safety, we are creating a vulnerable space. And so I'm asking that we hold each other with grace and love as we do this. Questions aren't dumb. They help us discover a deeper and perhaps safer truth. So in this webinar format, asking clarifying questions in the chat box is great, and other questions at the end. This one's a little hard to put on a webinar, but I felt it was important nonetheless. Step up, step back. And what that means, many of you use this in your youth groups or in your classes, that we want to hear from everyone. So if you're the shy one and you don't want to say something, take a little bit of a risk and ask your question, put something in the chat box. Let us know you're out there. We want to hear from you. And if you're the type of person who is really eager and asks a lot of questions, just check yourself. Are you taking a fair share of the space together? And the next one. So, especially with safety, we're all triggered by different things, and safety, just the topic of it, can trigger something really deep within us. We've all had different experiences. We've all had different levels of safety in our lives, and I'm asking you to take care of yourselves as you need to. If something comes up for you and you need to pause or leave the room or whatever it is, to take care of yourself as we go through this. And lastly, let us be diverse in thought and opinion and actions, but let us be unified in the spirit of love. And so just take a minute and ask, is there anything else that you would like us to name out loud as we enter into this webinar together that will help you feel safe in this space? I'm going to look to the chat box. I'm going to give just a moment. I'm not seeing anything. Derby's saying looks good, no additions for him. And I will be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. That can help us feel safe to know, am I going to get this later or not? Do I have to scribble these notes? So yes, you will be getting it. Okay, I don't see anything else, so if anything comes up as we move on, please use the chat box. And again, with clarifying questions, if I'm going too fast, too slow, if you didn't hear something or you just don't understand something, please use that chat box. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. And I think this is a great time for you just to see me. So I'm going to close my presentation, and I'm going to open my camera up for you. And I am ready to broadcast it. And here I am. So when I started as a DRE at Jefferson Unitarian Church, I had a lot of expertise in a lot of things, but being a DRE wasn't one of them. And I had taught in our congregations before. I grew up a Unitarian Universalist, and it was a real call for me to leave my business career and come into religious education. So I took it very seriously, and I did have some experience from being in the classroom of what safety was like and what our minister of religious education felt was important when he worked with me. It was interesting, though, because we had this unspoken knowledge that two things. One is that we had glass windows in all of our doors, and we didn't have locks on any of our doors. So all the religious education classrooms had clear windows that people could peer into, and all the doors were accessible. None of them could be locked. And I would hear people talk about this, people on staff. They would say, oh, that's a safe congregation policy. And oh, it's a safe congregation policy. You have to have two people in the classroom at all times. And these were sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken norms. Well, I took safety really seriously, and I would ask questions of staff like, well, where is this policy? Oh, it's out there somewhere. Okay, well, are you talking about a UUA policy, or are you talking about a congregation policy? It was never very clear, so of course I had to dig into it. And what I found out was there was no policy in our congregation, at least not one that I could find. And when I went looking through resources at the UUA, I went looking for almost a piece of paper that said, here are the 4 steps or 14 steps that you have to take in order to become a safe congregation. Well, that didn't happen. So let me go back to turn off my camera. I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you. I'm opening the presentation. how I got here, this is what I just shared with you. I heard things like we don't have locks on the classroom doors, we have clear windows, we have 2 teachers at all times because of these safe congregation policies. And that what's missing part, I couldn't find one. And I couldn't find that, what I'm going to call the Holy Grail, on the UUA website or UUA resources either. And so what I realized was that the staff was relying on someone, and in this case me, to be responsible for safety. And the staff had this idea of, that person's got it, I respect that person and their qualifications and their knowledge, and I don't need to know anything about it. So I have this terrible saying that, what happens if I get hit by a bus? How is the congregation going to continue to function in the system that it's in if I'm not here? So I set out to look for processes and policies, and I was looking for that Holy Grail. I didn't find one. I admit that fully. But what I did find was there was incredible intention and attention to safety in people at the UUA, people in congregations, colleagues of mine. There's incredible attention and intention. And there were a lot of fabulous UU sources on most of the circles of safety, which I will talk about in just a sec. I was finding at the time not very much about safety and mass violence, and I will address that. And that got just a little bit smaller, but I also found this really strong faithful desire to promote safety in our congregations and help make it easier for congregational leaders, is what that should say, to do the same. And I see that Patrick has joined us. Welcome, Patrick. No worries for being late. So what is safety anyway? This was one of my first and foremost questions. And so for you guys, I'm sure that something popped into your mind when you thought of safety and you thought of taking a webinar to learn a little bit more and explore that issue. What I found was safety wasn't just about classrooms in the congregation. I found this holistic approach: internet safety, mass violence, fire and natural disaster, sexuality, physical, and emotional and spiritual. And that really shifted how I started to think about safety. Remember, I was looking for this holy grail. I wanted this one sheeter that said, these are the things that you need to do in order to keep your congregation safe. And as I dug into it, I realized, wow, this is a lot more than I realized. So again, physical, emotional, spiritual, sexual, psychological. What do we do with that, right? That's a ton of stuff. And that's overwhelming for me. You know, looking at all of this and thinking about, am I here to care for all of these aspects? And how do I possibly do that? So I started thinking through, well, how do we actually do this? How do we keep our kids and our congregation safe? I came across a quote from Kay Montgomery, and it's in the foreword of a resource that I am going to share with you. And Kay writes this. I'm going to share my camera with you as I read this. Kay writes, "It hurts to write it, but it's true. A church, by definition, is not a safe place. Not even our beloved Unitarian Universalist churches. The same human frailties and sins play themselves out here as elsewhere. They are, however, particularly heartbreaking in a church. The place we go for solace and clarity, to make justice, to find religion. No congregation, no place on earth can guarantee that it is a safe place. We can make our beloved congregations safer. Education and clear policies, and with moral courage and informed decisions." turn my camera off. I'm going to share back the PowerPoint. What Kay's quote did for me was helped me reduce my fear that I was not making this congregation as safe a place as I could. And she helped me realize it's not about being safe, it's about being safer and being educated, having clear policies, and having courage. And so safe congregations are actually healthy congregations. This may pull up the full text. It does. I know you're going to read this. I'll read it along with you. A safe congregation is a healthy congregation. It is a place where we can come together in justice, compassion, and love. It is a place where we can be ourselves, yet also be open to the transforming power of change. It is a place where we can allow conflict to bring out the best in ourselves, not the worst. It is a place where we all belong. So it's this framework of a safe congregation is a healthy congregation. That gave me a new framework for looking at this. And it gave me courage, if you will, to be able to really wrestle with all of the aspects of safety, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the mass violence, the natural disasters, the fire. So if we move towards this with a knowledge that we're doing this more safely, it's safer, and safe congregations are healthy ones, then we're on the right track. I want to give you a little bit of history of how we got to where we are. So in the early 1980s and 1990s, there was this growing awareness of clergy sexual misconduct. And from 1984 to 1994, 22 complaints that were reported to the UUA. There were 22 complaints that were reported to the UUA for clergy sexual misconduct. Interestingly, 13 of those, so more than half, took place in a 3-year period between 1990 and 1993. So the point of my telling you this is that when safety was really starting to be wrestled with, it was being wrestled with under this time where clergy sexual misconduct was being really carefully looked at and scrutinized. So in 1992, the UUA Board of Trustees created a task force on congregational response to clergy sexual misconduct. And in 1997, the UUA published a handbook, a workbook, titled Creating Safe Congregations Toward an Ethic of Right Relations, and it's a workbook for Unitarian Universalists. So I call that 1997 workbook an early resource from the UUA. It, again, was about creating safe congregations, but remember the history just before that. It was a time when our sensitivities were really heightened to sexual misconduct. So you really need to understand that's the lens that this was created from. Now, this is a resource that is no longer in print. I went on to one of the a used bookseller online and I found a copy. So I actually have a copy of it, and you could probably find one too if you wanted. But it is out of print. It does take a holistic approach, but it is very focused on safety from a sexual standpoint. So the takeaways from this are this is an early resource. It's sexual misconduct focused. And again, that's translating for people who work in a religious education realm that the threat's in the classroom, right? The threat is potentially a teacher or an adult who is going to harm a child inside the classroom. And that makes sense why we have these practices of clear windows and no locks on doors. So in the early 2000s, though, let's look at what happened. We have this holistic approach to safety. and by that I mean taking into consideration all of the aspects of safety: emotional, spiritual, physical, sexual. This holistic approach, but again, it's heavily prompted by the sexual misconduct of the mid-1980s and early 1990s. Anecdotally, in my congregation, and I would be interested to hear from the rest of you, that Sunday morning classes for kids had a focus on protection from sexual abuse. Again, the threat's in the classroom, it's not coming from elsewhere. And that's a valid and important threat, but that was really the primary focus of safety that we were looking at. Okay. I am hitting the wrong button here, friends. There we go. So in the 2000s, now our awareness is heightened to mass shootings. Here in Colorado is home to Columbine High School, more recently Sandy Hook Elementary, and those are the only two that I've listed, and there are more. So mass shootings where children are have absolutely heightened our awareness to a threat not only being inside the classroom or inside a congregation, but coming from outside. And of course, the shooting in one of our beloved UU congregations in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm bringing this up because I'm sharing the landscape is shifting a bit from our history of what we thought of as being the primary threat, and that was sexual misconduct in the classroom or in the congregation at large. And sharing that the landscape's shifting, our awareness is shifting. And by shifting, I don't mean taking it away from safety in the classroom from a sexual perspective. I'm saying we're adding to it. The concerns about mass shootings in schools and in one of our congregations. So where do we go from here? So we continue to take a holistic approach. We understand that our history was greatly informed by sexual health and sexual safety. I invite us to question the practices that we currently have in our congregations. For instance, the clear windows and the locks, instead of what I witnessed at our church where people just said, well, that's what it is, that's just what we do, that as religious leaders, we really question those practices. Are they serving the purpose that they were intended to serve, and do they serve where we are as a congregation right now? And use our resources. So I'm gonna review our resources for just a moment. I usually facilitate with a group of shiny faces, so it's different for me to not see if the group's with me or not. If you're totally lost or totally with me, you can give me something in the chat. Take a sip of water too. So, thank you, Lori. The Safe Congregation Handbook. This came out in 2005. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick Sain's with us. 2005, the Safe Congregation Handbook. Nurturing healthy boundaries in our faith. Okay, this is a phenomenal resource, and I'm actually going to take you to the UUA website here in a little bit and show you where you can find it. The format is essays and workshops. And it's so cool because there are people, ministers, religious educators, youth group advisors who have taken the time to write these really thoughtful essays on safety. And it's from all aspects, congregation and culture, transformational leadership, self-care. There's all these different aspects to it. And at the back of that book, there are workshops that you can actually lead with your congregation, or your staff team, or your ministerial team. So they've made it really accessible and easy to start getting the culture of safety into our congregation. The approach is holistic. It's practical. There's a checklist, for instance, that we'll get into a needs assessment. There's 5 pages of resources in the back. And here's possibly the best part. It's online as of 2010. It's at uua.org. You just print it out and you bind it, and you've got it. So here's some UUA resources. I'm going to take you there in just a sec. Other UU resources. District executives. I know we're moving to regional organization, but I know there's also district executives in a lot of places still. And depending on your district, they may have resources there. There may be a religious education professional on staff. Loretta, of course, a resource. And listserv. And so my point here is that we're not alone in this. I know that doing work as a DRE can oftentimes feel lonely, and I would say that probably as any religious professional, even though we work with people. Sometimes it can feel for me like I'm out here alone, and I know I'm not, and I'm hoping that you guys will know too. Just remember the resources that we have, not just the books, but the people. And partner organizations. Partner organizations such as Stop It Now, pbskids.org, Children Now, which I didn't put up there, Parenting Safe Children. Lori, actually, if you wouldn't mind putting in the notes, ParentingSafeChildren.org. That's a fantastic organization that talks about how parents can talk to kids about boundaries. Thank you, Lori. So partner organizations, so not just the UUA or UU partners, but other partner organizations. Now get this. Well, sorry, don't get this. Faith resources. There's Deborah Hafner's Religious Institute. I'm going to share that website in a sec. And this is the part that is, get this, community resources. Boy Scouts of America does this great youth protection training, and it's free, and you can print out this cute little certificate when you're done saying you did it. So I'm actually going to share my screen with you. All right. Click share. I'm going to do lower quality. It's initializing. Okay. Hopefully you can see everything on my screen. So we're going to go backwards here from the order that we did. So here's the Boy Scouts of America website, and they have this huge section on youth protection. And I took a youth protection training online. It was just watching a video and then answering a few questions. And it really, I found it very helpful. And I'm just clicking through here. There's a bunch of other resources on the Boy Scouts of America site. I know that can feel kind of funny to you use, to be utilizing resources from an organization that hasn't always shared similar values. But they've done a lot of good work in this area, and I'm a big advocate of utilizing resources that are out there in the community. So that's the Boy Scouts of America. This is the Religious Institute. This is an institute that was developed by Reverend Deborah Hafner, and she is a strong voice in sexual health. And one of the things I love about Religious Institute is that they offer an online course on sexual healthy religious professionals. And you can go through this on your own, but you see here it says events, sexuality training for Baptist ministers, sexuality education and seminary training. I took an online course here that was fantastic, just absolutely fantastic, and really helped me understand where some of my areas of growth were, where some of my prejudices were, And the whole point here is that as we grow as being healthy adults, and in this case sexually healthy adults, then our congregations will be too. But again, you see here that this is a big focus on the sexuality piece of keeping congregations safe. So that's another great resource for you, the Religious Institute. And here we are at our beautiful UUA.org. And I'm going to go to this maroon-looking box called Congregational Management. And I'm going to scroll down to, right here, Safe Congregations. Click on that. And here we have just a host of resources. And some of these I have already mentioned. I'm looking for it right now. So creating safe congregation policies. You'll see resources on gun violence, balancing acts. That's Deborah Hafner. That's a great resource, but again, focused primarily on sexual health. Church Mutual is an insurance company for a variety of congregations, and that's a great resource for background screening, fire prevention. They're happy to talk to you. And here is the Safe Congregations Handbook that I was telling you about, the one that was published in 2005, and as of 2010, it's available free online. So let's just go ahead and click on that. And by let's, I say me. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then over here on the right-hand side in related content is the actual PDF. Loads up. 184-page document. This is the one that I was talking about that is full of essays. Sorry, guys, that is full of essays and workshops. So you will have this on your to-do list at the end of the webinar to print this out if you don't have it already, and just bind it. Take it to Office Depot if you don't have a binder, and you will have a great resource at your fingertips. I also have up here childrennow.org. When we talk about safety, it's a delicate subject. People get scared, and I find that resources on how to talk about tough issues are really useful. It's useful when you're talking to your religious education committees, to your peers, to your ministers, to the congregants at large. And childrennow.org is a great one. And Lori, actually, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the notes too, that would be phenomenal. So I am going to take us back to the presentation. You should not be able to see my screen anymore at this point, but I will pull the webinar back up, or the PowerPoint back up. Oh, okay. Community resources. And so here's a recap. The UUA publications that I shared with you, first and foremost, the most important one, I think, is the Safe Congregation Handbook, which you can get online, that one that we just looked at the PDF. Other UU resources on that page, there's a ton of them there. And you will notice that there was talk about mass violence and gun violence, and that's relatively new since I started looking into this. So partner organizations such as PBS, Stop It Now, Parenting Safe Children, organizations that are dedicated to help keeping people healthy and safe. And don't forget the community resources like Boy Scouts of America, or if there's the YMCA or other organizations in your community that are already doing great work around safety and boundaries, don't be afraid to talk to them. They're going to want to share what they know. So partnering with other community organizations is key too. So now what? So you have this huge just tome of information, and it can get really overwhelming. And I'm going to share my camera with you. Here we go. And I'm going to take my presentation away so you can see me big and happy. So you have this tome of information, right? This was my printing out the Safe Congregation Handbook and binding it here. And there's all this awesome information. We have this one's the one that was out of print, the Safe Congregation Handbook, and the Balancing Act Handbook. We have so many resources, and in my job, I can't speak for the rest of you, but I hear it a lot, it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do another thing, and how am I going to actually pay attention to safety, which is one of the most important things, but it actually seems like it's easy to let it slide because things are going okay. I totally can relate to that. So now what? I wanted to make this really tangible for you guys so you could have next steps to take and feel the impact of how big this really is, but also tangible things that you can do to take back to your congregation. So I'm going to go back, take my camera away. I'm going to share my presentation again, spinning it up. So now what? So taking it home, I'm going to give you 3 to-dos and 3 to-nos. So here I'm going to skip this. 3 to-dos. Name 3 congregational allies. Okay, so what is a congregational ally? An ally is someone who will talk with you respectfully, who will listen to others, and who will have the health of the conversation in mind. Excuse me, so I want you to, one of your 3 to-dos is for you to name 3 people in your congregation who could be allies around safety. It might be your senior minister. It might be the chair of your religious education committee. But I don't want you to do this alone. I want you to know that there are people out there and who are championing this with you. This is not just your job. You will lead it, but this is not just yours to do. So I want you to name those 3 people. I will also give you the tip that diversity is equal to buy-in. So choose people with kids and without kids. Choose people of varying ages, of varying interests in the church. So maybe somebody really has a social justice bent in the church, and maybe somebody's really into denominational connections, right? You want a variety of people in this group, and variety of backgrounds, because that's going to give you gravitas. If someone looks at this group of people and says, oh, those are just the people who have kids, that's really different than, wow, this, the DRE or whatever your role is has gotten this group of people together who are cross sections of this church. You're going to get more buy-in. Number 2, so do the needs assessment. And I am actually going to share this with you. Oh, gracious. So in that big 184 page, oh, I did the high quality. That's okay. The screen sharing. Here we go. You can see my screen again. So in the big 184 page handbook, this one, on page 150, I'm going to go right to it, hopefully. No, we're not. I'll just scroll down. I know I'm going faster than you can see, and that's okay. We're going to go to page 150. There it was. The needs assessment. This is a needs assessment checklist for congregations. And for some reason, the little boxes are not showing up on my screen, and therefore they're not showing up for you. But each one of these bullets here has a checkbox. And this is a needs assessment for you to go through. I'm going to have you take that in. I'm going to go back to the, oh, I didn't stop sharing. Bear with me. There we go. I'm going to pull up my presentation again. Open it. So do the needs assessment. So that's page 150 in the Safe Congregations Handbook. I'm asking you to meet with those 3 allies to review and discuss that checklist. I don't want you doing that alone. When you go through the checklist, you are likely to find things you are doing and things you are not doing. Don't focus on the things you aren't doing. Not at first. Focus on the things that you are doing. Focus on those bright spots. Celebrate those bright spots, and then look at, well, why is it that we were doing that? What made that possible? Do we actually have a safe congregation policy? If you do, great. How did that come about? And then you can start going through the rest of the checklist, knowing how some of those successes came to be. And it should make it easier. Okay, so here's the third one. The to-do is to call the sheriff's department. And here's why. I'm going to take you through. I'm skipping this, but this is what I talked about verbally. I talked about this one verbally too, the needs assessment. But I'm going to go right here. And I know this is a little bit wordy, so bear with me. The number 3 to do is to call the sheriff's department, call the non-emergency number. And here's why. Remember our history of preventing sexual abuse in the classroom led us to do practices like no locks on doors and windows. And that sent a really clear message that that we weren't going to tolerate abuse inside the classroom. We still won't tolerate abuse inside the classroom. However, windows and no locks equals an inability to lock down or to shelter in place. And at the time of my putting all of this together, the current literature really wasn't talking about sheltering in place. And so I'm encouraging you to investigate that with your local authority. I'm going to do my camera now here for a sec. I am ready to broadcast, and then I am going to close this presentation, so it should be big. There we go. So schools have the ability to lock down, okay? And in the research that I've done on mass violence, when there is an intruder who is looking to do as much harm as possible, they're looking to do exactly that, as much harm as possible, as quickly as possible. And so the ability for a school or a congregation to be able to close blinds and lock doors is going to deter the speed at which somebody can do damage. So I actually had the sheriff's department out here and had the, I don't know what if he was a deputy or what he was, probably not actually the sheriff, but someone from the sheriff's department out here, and I had him take me through our entire facility. And I had him point out areas that he was concerned about. And absolutely, without a doubt, he had a huge concern that we were not able to shelter in place. Exactly the reasons that I just described. So a couple things about that. So I'm encouraging you, call the sheriff's department, call the non-emergency number, and simply say, I'm a religious leader in your community, and I'm looking to partner with local authorities to help keep our congregation safe. And they will likely have a community person who they will put you in touch with, and then just talk to that person. Say exactly what I just said. You're looking to help keep the congregation safe in partnership with the local authorities. Would that person come out and visit with you, have some conversation, look through your facility, and show you the areas that are of concern? So a couple things to keep in mind. Don't do it alone. Do not do it alone. Remember that you want buy-in from the congregation. This is not something that is going to be the DRE's. This doesn't belong just to the DRE. This belongs to the entire congregation. You are going to lead it, likely. You're on this webinar. You're likely going to be the one to lead this effort, but you're not going to do it alone, and you can't do it alone. So when you have that meeting, have key players with you, those 3 allies that I said. And ask yourself, who else needs to be around the table? Is it my administrator? Is it our caretaker? Who needs to be part of this conversation? It was absolutely useful to have the sheriff out here, and excuse me. I will also share that they do what they do for a living, and so their focus really is on where the bad guy's going to get in. If you have the fire department out, they're going to focus on how do I get people out of this building as fast as humanly possible. And so you may get conflicting information, just like the fact that we have made practices around windows in doors for classrooms and an inability to lock it. That's at odds with the ability to shelter in place and lock down. One thing that I'll share that I'm looking at in our congregation is being able to have a curtain that pulls down over the window, and we actually have done this already, not for safety purposes, but interestingly to help a renter out in our congregation. And so the window has a blind that was made, and it has Velcro on the bottom, and so it just Velcros straight up back onto the door. So my vision is that all of our doors have that. They have the ability to have a curtain that pulls down, but our practice and our policy is that it always stays open unless there's an emergency. Okay, so I am going to turn my camera back off. I'm going to share my slide again. And Derby had mentioned that the slide is one ahead of what I was saying, so let's hope I am back on track here. So those were the 3 to-dos, the 3 to-knows. Congregations aren't safe, but they can be safer. You are a religious leader in a shared ministry. This is not yours alone, but you can lead the way. And safety is complex. Combat it with ongoing knowledge and black and white goals. So this is something that you're going to need to be committed to doing reading on. You're committing to taking this webinar. That's awesome. It's something that is on the forefront of your mind and in your ongoing professional development. And you can complement that with black and white goals, such as at the end of 6 months, we will have a policy in place for off-site, I'm making this up, for off-site activities. Or in 1 year, we will have a policy in place that clearly outlines what to do in the event of an intruder on the premises. So it's a complex issue, but with ongoing knowledge and black and white goals, it's one that we can work towards to create safer congregations. So final recap. You have resources. There are a ton of resources out there. You are not alone. Your 3 to-dos are to name 3 allies, do that needs assessment, and to call the non-emergency number for the sheriff. And your 3 to-knows. Remember, it's safer, not safe. It's safer. You are not alone, but you are likely the one leading the way and combining ongoing training with black and white goals. So I'm going to leave this open to questions. Oh, and Diane was saying that the chalice was on the screen and then she was seeing the to-do, so it doesn't sound like it was in sync with my voice, so I apologize for that. I'm going to take a sip of water. And if anybody has questions, comments, things that didn't make sense, go ahead and put that in the chat box. Lori's helping Diane troubleshoot a little bit with the slow connection. I'm wondering if Diane's connection is slow. How much time do you think you invested in doing this for your congregation? Oh, Derby. That's a great question. I probably went overboard, and I'm going to turn my camera on and talk to you. I probably went overboard. I can't give you an actual number of hours that I worked on this. It's definitely been something that I've been interested in for well over a year. But I think maybe the relevant question is how much time is this going to take for you? And that really depends on that needs assessment that you do. Take a look at that, see where your congregation is now, and then just chunk it out into small steps. I was listening to a book on CD, and it was talking about the first step of a journey is, you can't take a journey without that step. And then it went on to say, well, you can't take a journey without the next one either. And I think that's really true here. Take a first step, but keep on going. David is asking, did you meet any resistance to any particular policy? I didn't meet resistance to any particular policy. I met resistance to the fact that we were even talking about safety. And that, I think, is just coming from a terrible place of fear. And in our congregation, I can't speak for others, there are things that are pretty unclear about how decisions are made. And I think that was a big barrier for people in wanting to even engage in the conversation around safety, because they're not sure how to actually get things done. And that's where I go back to, you're not alone, but you're probably going to be leading the way on that. And one thing with resistance and change is that what often looks like resistance on behalf of a congregation is usually a lack of clarity. And this is well told in research on change, that when there's a lack of clarity about what the action is, then people aren't going to do anything with it. So the clearer you can be about what you need and what the congregation needs, the better. Are there any more questions down there in the bottom of that chat box? Those are great questions. And again, I have to say, I am just thrilled that you guys are taking the initiative and the time to at least start to think about this. David asked, did you get your policy down to the level of what do I put into the first aid kit? David, we haven't gotten down to the policy. Okay, so what I'm preaching, I am in the midst of doing. What is in the first aid kit? I would say looking at, right? I would say look at some sample policies, and let me share my screen with you really quickly. Because in the research, I saw a lot of reference to sample policies, but my best bet was actually just doing a Google search and finding policies from just various churches. And so let's just do that together really quickly. I'm going to share my full screen here. Diane, I hope this is going to work for you. Initializing, I'm going to turn my camera off. Give it a little bit more. All right. Oh, there's all my. So let's do a Google search on UU Safe Congregation policy template. Let's just search on template. So now we see, hopefully you will see the purple links where I've gone to Safe Congregations, to the Balancing Acts, but I'm going to search down here and see, so the UU Ridgewood or congregation, I'm going to pull that up and let's just see what they have here. Safe Congregation Philosophy, and so this says they're excerpts that are from the full Safe Congregation policy, which is attached as a downloadable PDF file at the bottom. And so going to our brothers and sisters around the nation is a really great place to start. And so right down there, if we click on that, will pop up the Safe Congregation policy for this congregation. I love taking the best practices from folks that have already walked that path. And it's really great too if you see something here, call the DRE at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood, for instance, and say, what was your process? What worked for you? Now keep in mind, I'm going to try and go back to where we were so you can see me. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to turn on my camera. Broadcast. There I am. Remember, your congregation is your unique, own, beautiful congregation, and that is the joy that we live in as Unitarian Universalists in our polity. But the more you talk to folks who've already been down the road, I think the better. And Deanna is saying they have one at uulosalamos.org. Phenomenal! Okay. And Lori was, in Tacoma, was talking about clarity being oftentimes the cause of resistance or lack thereof clarity. Getting that out. Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We have 15 minutes. We don't have to use 15 minutes, but want to offer any other questions, thoughts. Lori is writing, wouldn't it be cool to have a neighboring church member come and share their safe congregation? Oh, yes! Yes! So we have a couple churches down the street. We have a Baptist church and just a non-denominational church within a mile. Absolutely love that. So I'm going to share my screen one last time. Lori's asking if there's anything else, folks. And I'm going to scroll down. Oh, David's saying we are partnering with the local UCC church to write our policy. Awesome. That's awesome. Love interfaith work. Oh, and Derby's asking who implements a policy once you have one. Derby, I'm going to make some guesses, but as I talk, can you maybe write a little bit more about what you mean? I'm thinking that like once that's implemented, who actually does the work to make sure like there are 2 teachers in the room, that people are going over covenant. It depends on your role as a DRE. That I would see as my role here. To make sure that things actually get implemented, but doing that shared work with safe facilities, because I would like to be able to lock the doors, working with the teachers to make sure they've signed code of ethics, that kind of thing. Not sure if that answers Derby's question. Hope so. Okay, a little bit more. I got to scroll up here. So David is sharing that his board is tasked with assessing the effectiveness of new policies. What do I ask them to do? David, if you do you have a safe congregation policy already? I would like to know before I answer that. And then I'm going to read Derby's here. Oh, okay. So Derby, as David answers if he has a safe congregation policy, maybe he has. Yes, they do. Okay, so you have one and your board is tasked with assessing the effectiveness. What do you ask them to do? I'm going to turn to the wisdom of the group here. What do you guys think that David would ask the board to do? They have a safe congregation policy. David, do you think it's working? David says no. That's why I'm here. Then I would do the needs assessment and then identify that might help you identify where the areas are that aren't working and why, and then you would actually have a piece of paper to say, hey board, I don't think this stuff is working. It's not just me. Here are some best practices. Yeah, okay. Okay, good. So, and then Derby was saying, let me go back up here. Oh, Derby was talking about who is responsible and just many, many areas of responsibility. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Derby. It's a shared ministry, and the tasks are shared. So fire extinguishers working in our congregation, that would be the responsibility of our caretaker. I wouldn't take that on. That may be part of a safe congregation policy that I would review and say, look at that to say, okay, we require working fire extinguishers. And then I would go to our caretaker and say, can you tell me, do you test these every 6 months? What do you do? And drills with the whole church. Lori saying we've actually done that too. I can't say that was well received or ill received. It just kind of was, but at least it heightened the awareness for everyone. I mean, we're 750 congregation. Our sanctuary holds 300, and we have 100 kids on a Sunday morning, and everybody went out. So at least it heightens awareness. And I think doing that on a Sunday is not a bad idea. Okay. All right. Great. Other Lori is signing off. Thank you for joining us. Absolutely. So just a little after 4, and we still have our chalice here. And I am going to hopefully read you some closing words, and I'll give you just a sec too if there's any other parting thoughts you want to put there in that chat box. Let's see if I can find closing words. Not being quite successful. Oh, there they are. Okay, I'm going to go back and look here at the chat box. Yep. Okay, there'll be a survey at the end of the meeting. Good. So I'm going to take my face out of there so you can just see the chalice. There we are. You say the little efforts I make do no good. They will never prevail to tip the hovering scale where justice hangs in balance. I don't think I ever thought they would, but I am prejudiced beyond debate in favor of my right to choose which side shall feel the stubborn ounces of my weight. So as I extinguish this chalice, I invite you to remember you are in community. You are not here alone. This is a journey. You are absolutely one step on the way, and you are not alone, but you are likely the ones leading it, and know that you are in good company and faithful company as you do so. Blessings on the rest of your afternoon.